The horror genre is no stranger to depictions of the world's monsters, but unlike all the movies that had come before it, Psycho introduced us to, a different type of antagonist. Norman Bates was no creature from the Black Lagoon. He was entirely human, but he hid behind something else, cross-dressing, and that's where the issue comes in. Transsexualism within horror is a trope that is so widely fallen back on, much in the same way it is in comedy, for example, whereas a man in a dress is often seen as an easy cop-out when you can't think of a better punchline to a joke. It's used in the same way in horror, essentially just shock value when you can't figure out a more intelligent way to make the plot proceed. In order to understand this trope, we have to go back to the beginning, which is, again, Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 movie, Psycho. Don't get it twisted, I fucking love this movie, I think it's so good, it's genuinely one of my favorite horror movies ever made, but I don't see that as meaning that it is now free from critique. I've genuinely had arguments with people who seemed really personally upset by my critique of these films, as if it is inherently saying that they are bad or flawed in some way, when I think the reality of it is they're products of the time that they were made, and they are both art that has value and worthy of critique, nonetheless. You can like things and still admit that the things you like are not good. I like Saw. Is it well made? Let's keep going. While not explicitly being a trans story, Psycho sets a precedent that I think is really dangerous, portraying a man dressing up as a woman as something that is a threat specifically to cis women, and it became a staple of horror movies coming after it. Throughout the film, Norman is shown to be deeply unstable. The psychosexual relationship with his mother is shown to be the primary reason for that, and it's also shown to be the reason for his cross-dressing. The traits of Norman's mental illness increase steadily throughout the film after he hides the body of Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, thinking that his mother is the one that committed her murder. It's eventually revealed that he killed his mother, because of her sexual relationship with another man, again linking his psychosexual problems to the fact that he cross-dresses. Throughout the movie, they use a bunch of excuses for why he isn't a transsexual, but none of that really matters when the end result of the film is still audiences seeing a person that is being presented as trans killing innocent cis women. It's revealed in the film that Norman suffers from split personality disorder, causing him to dress up as his mother and become her for prolonged periods of time, including when he murders people. Psycho establishes several things. Cross-dressing as a manifestation of mental illness, the portrayal of trans bodies as being grotesque and ugly and disgusting, and most worryingly, it kind of posits this idea of the true transsexual, something that justifies this transphobia in horror going forward, that I think is personally really worrying.
Why was he dressed like that?
He's a transvestite.
Not exactly. A man who dresses in women's clothing in order to achieve a sexual change or satisfaction is a transvestite. But in Norman's case, he was simply doing everything possible to keep alive the illusion of his mother being alive.
That being said, Psycho is a classic, and nothing can change that. But the precedent it set was still harmful, and the films that came after were less subtle in their execution. Brian De Palma's 1980s hit thriller Dressed to Kill is one of the more vile films that I've watched for something like this. It combines, in my opinion, pretty lazy visual references to Psycho with just an overtly transphobic plot that really just does nothing for me. Our main character is Michael Caine, in this case playing Dr. Robert Elliott, who again suffers from a split personality disorder that causes him to dress up as a woman. I think his female persona is called Bobby, and the way that they refer to Bobby is like genuinely kind of disgusting. This movie is a lot more explicit with the trans stuff than Psycho was. They have like a 2-minute segment in it talking about transsexualism, and then do a really lazy job of not actually explaining it at all in the last 5 minutes of the film.
Castration, plastic reconstruction, and the formation of an artificial vagina. A vaginoplasty to those in the know.
I thought Ellie just put on a dress.
Oh, he did, and a wig too. But you see, that's no good in bed when you gotta take everything off.
Throughout the film, several characters state that Bobby is mentally unstable, that she is not a true transsexual, again, that it is all a manifestation of her mental illness that is causing her to behave this way. For context, Dress to Kill's plot is a little bit different in that the reason that Bobby kills people is that she is punishing the male side of herself for not allowing a surgical transition by killing any woman that causes him to have physical arousal. They're talking about erections because this movie is fucking disgusting. Inherently linking trans people, violence, and sex all at the same time, and it's just... This movie is not good, man, and I'm still convinced it's just the whole thing was just an excuse for Brian De Palma to, like, put his girlfriend on screen naked a bunch of times and spew some weird shit about trans people that I don't even think people really, like, understood when it came out. This movie was just bad. Like, Dress to Kill is, like, laced with overindulgent sexuality much more than Psycho ever was, making it both incredibly tasteless and incredibly pointless. Another part of it that's just really icky is this idea of trans people somehow trying to steal womanhood from cis women, in horror often represented as literally killing them. Why would painting trans women as a threat to cis women cause societal problems going forward? I don't know, man. My hands are clean. My hands are squeaky clean. This idea of femininity as something to be taken is something that really runs deep in the horror community, both more broadly with most grotesque violence in horror being directed towards women, but also more specifically with this trope of the killer transsexual. In 1991, Silence of the Lambs introduced us to another example of this, Buffalo Bill, who kills and skins women literally to make a woman suit for themselves. Cool, man. Thanks, Thomas Harris. We heart you. Well, obviously falling into all of the previous tropes and worse, this film offered us something that none of the previous films had, which is an explicit look into transsexual life, almost to an exploitative extent. We see the inside of Bill's house is, like, lined with makeup and costumes and photos of them with drag queens and performers. The audience sees them dressing up, applying makeup, and all while their cis victim screams in the other room. And it's like, this is uncomfortable. The trans body is exploited here for shock factor, twisted from something completely natural and uncontrollable into something grotesque and monstrous.
Who do you fuck with?
Come on, take that bone. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on.
I fuck with.
Come on.
I'd fuck with so.
Their body is shown to be grotesque, but also a sex object. it's very illuminating about the way that the audience is supposed to react to it. Like, clearly they're supposed to be afraid, but you're also supposed to, in a way, be attracted to them, and that's a confusing feeling, especially for 1991. The way that many of these films get away with it, as I've been saying, is with their definition of what a true transsexual is. This movie, like the ones that came before it, has a scene where they inevitably discuss the validity of Bill's trans identity, concluding that they are not trans on the basis that they didn't get approved for hormone treatment, which is like, any trans person can tell you that that doesn't mean jack shit about your actual validity as a queer person. It just means the American healthcare system is fucked up.
Billy is not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is. He tries to be. He's tried to be a lot of things, I expect.
If I was living in 1991 and they refused me for HRT, I'd fucking kill someone too. I'm joking. This is a joke. I'm joking. Bates' identity in Psycho is more acceptable as a manifestation of his Oedipus complex than as anything to do with transsexuality. In the same way, the audience is able to point and gasp at Bobby in Dressed to Kill because she's just mentally unstable. She's not a real transsexual, so it's okay to feel disgusted by it. It's okay to feel grossed out. And is it really, though? True transsexual is something that is incredibly hard to pin down in the horror genre. The 1983 film Sleepaway Camp falls into all of these tropes and more. And this is the point in the video where you may notice that I'm not reviewing these films in chronological order. I wonder why I did that. The antagonist of this film is 15-year-old Angela Baker, who was forcibly socialized as a girl by her insane aunt, which every acting choice that this actor makes is bonkers to me. I don't know what the fuck. What is this? What's going on?
Angela, isn't there anything special my little girl would care for?
We gotta go, Mom. It's getting late.
Why, of course you do, dear. We wouldn't want them to leave without us, now would we? No? No, I'm afraid that wouldn't do.
The film also shows that part of Angela's trauma is rooted in the fact that she saw her father having sex with another man, which, considering she also watched him brutally die in front of her, is not the most traumatic thing that this child has witnessed, and says a lot more about the people making the movie and what they consider to be gross and traumatizing than any kind of moral judgment on her father as a character. I'm not saying seeing something like that can't contribute to trauma, but it just feels homophobic, considering the rest of this movie. Angela commits various violent crimes throughout the film, including the sexual assault of a girl in her cabin, once again showing trans women inherently as predators towards cis women, specifically sexually. And there are like 5 adult male pedophiles in this movie. You didn't need to add another fucking sexual predator for it to like be shocking enough for people to want to watch it. No one is watching it for that. The audience is told that Angela is not a real trans person and that this decision is one that was made for her, but it doesn't make the final image of the movie any less disturbing. Angela, completely nude, covered in the blood of a child that she just killed. And yet the thing that is still the most shocking to the onlookers is the fact that she is trans.
How can it be? God, she's a boy.
The disgust that the audience is meant to feel is at this mutilated body. It's trumping the murder, it's trumping the assault, it's trumping the fact that, like, 5 minutes before she axe murdered a bunch of 6-year-olds for literally no reason at all. The thing that the audience is meant to find grotesque above all else is transsexuality. And that's bad. Angela is not a true transsexual by the measures of the horror genre. She's trans because of the things that have happened to her, not because of something to do with who she is. even though later in the films, when she is no longer under the oppression of her aunt, she continues with her medical transition completely. You see what I'm talking about now? These movies will directly contradict the things they say in them so that they can fall into the weird gray zone where it's okay to be transphobic because these aren't real trans people, and it's okay to be afraid of them because they're dangerous anyway. The horror genre does this over and over and over again, putting trans bodies on display as something we can ogle at and gasp at, and then leave the theater and allow to poison our worldview. I'm not even against the idea of cross-dressing and drag being shown in horror. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is one of my favorite films, and it does it in a way that is camp. There are things about that movie that are bad, but overall it's become a queer cult classic for a reason. It is possible. You are just too lazy to try. There are parts of that movie that are worth critiquing, but come on, this is camp. Innocent by way of serving cunt, Your Honor. Transsexualism has been made to appear monstrous since pretty much the beginning of Hollywood. The portrayal of transsexuals goes from quite offensive to literally actually disgusting, with pretty much nothing on the other side, and it makes trans bodies into this violent and grotesque object. The end of Sleepaway Camp is genuinely the most uncomfortable that I have ever felt watching a movie. I watched this with my middle-aged father, and when it was finished, we both had to sit on the couch in silence for 5 minutes, just thinking about what we'd just seen. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. This trope stays alive through fear. Fear of what's different from us, fear of nonconformity. The horror genre has always reflected the fears of the society that it takes place in. And watching these movies, you realize more and more that they paint a picture of a society that is just deeply afraid of the way things should be being disrupted. It's more sad than anything else that you can't even see a trans person on screen without inherently feeling scared. We're afraid of the breakdown of societal standards, the breakdown of the nuclear family, afraid of losing this ineffable, indescribable thing that transsexuals are trying to take away from us. But what are you really scared of?